Hi, this is John Rowell for the Rowell Report. Today is Monday, September 29th, 2025, and you may be wondering, what planet am I on? The peace president that I elected and the common sense vice president who um, entered the White House in January. Where have they gone? What have happened to them? Uh, you know, were they replaced by aliens? Were they given some sort of uh, mind treatment to change their position? Because especially with JD Vance, the vice president, he was a very much a common sense individual in Congress. He was certainly a shining star for the mega crowd because he eloquently expressed a position that was based on common sense and reason, and he even wrote that down in a editorial piece that he had published in the New York Times in April 2024, in which he argued against sending more weapons to Ukraine because of their manpower issue, and that just sending more weapons to Ukraine wouldn't change the situation for them. He also had argued in the past about sending more longer range U.S. weapons to Ukraine. So now he came on TV over the weekend and said we're looking at sending or selling Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Well, Tomahawk missiles can be um, sea based in a in a ship, or it can be launched from a submarine. But Ukraine needs a land based or land launched missile. So what are we going to send to Ukraine if there's are sent from a ship, or if they're launched from a submarine? So anyway, this goes back to some of the decisions made in the Trump White House in his first round, and so I'll get into that. But anyway, we know that there's been a considerable transformation in President Trump, especially from his most recent tweets. And some people said that he was being sarcastic. I would argue no, he was not being sarcastic. And now we're starting to see exactly the kind of attitude that he has towards this conflict in the language that they're talking about the Tomahawks, which could certainly be a red line for the Russians. So anyway, in order to understand this a little better, we need to go back to the INF Treaty. This was the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty that was signed into law in December 87 and took force in June of 88. This was at the end of the Reagan White House, when President Reagan had to slow down the nuclear weapons escalatory war, where the Russians and the United States were both building excessive number of nuclear weapons, and then it also turned into short range weapons, and we were getting very close to a nuclear conflict. So both the Soviets and President Reagan realized that we needed to pull back a little bit from all the acrimonial talk and all these nuclear weapons, or possibly weapon systems that could possibly be carrying nuclear weapons. So we had this INF treaty, and it brought peace to Europe for about 40 years. And so one of the weapons that was prohibited or banned because of that agreement was the missile called the Griffin, which is a Tomahawk missile. It was it used a transporter erector launcher vehicle, kind of like those vehicles you see in the parades with the missile on the back. And um, so these could be moved to any part of Europe and to launch a missile against the Soviet Union. And this was too much of a risk for both sides. So those missiles were destroyed or demilitarized. Anyway, the main point here is that President Trump departed that treaty in 2019. In August, he officially withdrew. And after that, they began to work on a ground based Tomahawk missile system. So, anyway, this ground based system was definitely to return to the European theater where it had been before. And so it's pretty obvious that since 2019, President Trump has been working towards a greater and greater conflict in Europe between the European NATO nations and Russia. And so we can see quite a bit of consistency in Trump 1 and Trump 2. The Griffin, which was banned by the INF treaty, is now basically going to be going back into Europe in a new version. We don't know exactly when or where, if they have them even produced or if they're still in the design or production phase. But anyway, the return of Tomahawk missiles to Europe would be a great sign of danger, and to return, or not to return, but to go to Ukraine would be an even greater sign of danger. So, anyway, I would like to say that this appearance of JD Vance on TV over the weekend really confirmed to me the attitude of President Trump in this conflict, that his Truth Social posts have not been sarcasm, but he really thinks that Ukraine can possibly win this war. How does he think that they can win this war? I think we're probably looking at some attempt at a decapitation strike using these Tomahawk missiles. And President Trump has used this before, and he tried to use that against the Iranian leadership to have a decapitation strike. He's applied it towards the Hezbollah leadership in Lebanon. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try that. Now, what would the response of the Russians be? I can't imagine it would be good. And would it have impact here in this continent of in the North America continent? So the question is that I don't think so, but if the Russians will know that if a Tomahawk attempts to decapitate the leadership in Russia, that this is an attack not by Ukraine but by the United States, because the guidance system for this Tomahawk missile, which involves an INS, which is basically an old school navigation system, gyroscopes and accelerometers, the GPS, which is the navigational system using the GPS system, the terrain guidance system. All these systems require to be programmed by an engineer, and this requires years of training. This is being used by the United States Navy. There isn't anyone in Ukraine who would be able to get up to speed fast enough on these missiles in order to make a difference in this conflict. It looks as if Ukraine has about a year left. So the main point here is that Russia would see that this is really the United States trying to attack and decapitate their leadership using this Tomahawk missile launched from within Ukraine. So anything could really happen. This is quite unfortunate. I think President Reagan was a very foresightful individual, and he could see where things were going. And this INF treaty, um, which which brought peace to Europe for almost 40 years, was a very smart agreement to have made. So we're lacking individuals like that in either party, and this will eventually create a conflict from which we cannot extricate ourselves. So, anyway, that is my report for today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you would like to subscribe, please do so. Thank you for supporting independent journalism. Everything helps, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye bye.